Welcome to Off the Post, powered by Lights On Electric and Coverall Exteriors. I'm Russ Cohen. We've got Anthony Mingione. And how are you?
It feels like Buffalo outside here, Russ.
Yeah, it's a little drab. And speaking of drab, we have Michael Jello. Mike, how are you?
I'm ho horrible today. Thank you very much.
Wow. All right. Speaking of horrible, Mike, let's talk about the changes in Toronto.
Natural segue.
Softball. It's funny because Brad Treliving comes out today and says, well, this is not the fault of Mark Savard. Okay, then why did you fire him? Because,
Right.
You did because you needed a sacrificial lamb, because this was a half measure. You don't want to fire your head coach. Now, I don't know why they don't want to fire their head coach. Could it be because nobody wants to take the job right now? They want to wait until the summer? Or could it be, I don't know. I mean, there's a number of things. Treliving has got one more year left in his contract. Does he have
that could be the reason they may have told him.
Does he have the authority to hire a new head coach? If he doesn't, then if Berube gets fired, it might be Treliving out with him. I mean, nobody really knows the reason why, but he basically said it wasn't Savard's fault. Berube clearly didn't want to fire him. He says he's a good friend, but their power play was the worst in the NHL, 13.3%. They only have 12 power play goals. They've given up 4 shorthanded goals, so their power play is a +8 right now for the season, which is horrendous. And it's not Mitch Marner not being on the point. It's like Austin Matthews is not getting shots off. William Nylander is not teeing up. I mean, they're just not getting opportunities, and they're too good. They have too much talent to not get opportunities. So
let's break this up. Okay. Everybody keeps saying they have too much talent. At some point, you have to stop saying it if they don't produce. And that's not to say another coach couldn't get a little more out of them, but they have problems.
But here's the one thing I'm going to add to this as well, is that Craig Berube coach teams have never been known to have great power plays, right? Even in the year he won the Stanley Cup, the St. Louis Blues power play, if I recall, wasn't particular. It was their 5-on-5 prowess that pretty much was generate their Stanley Cup run. But if I recall, their power play was not good at all during their Cup run. So there's a part of me that goes, is it the coach's philosophy and how he decides he wants to do his power play? And you find that kindred spirit in Mark Savard that, he thinks will be able to get, the philosophy to work with the parts that the Leafs have. I don't know. But
here's the thing. I have a stat here. Okay. So one Morgan Riley has no power play goals and 4 power play assists. Last year, he had 1 power play goal and 13 power play assists. Like, he's been dropping on the power play for years. And Mike and I have talked offline, like, hey, you have OEL. Why shouldn't he run the power play and at least give it a shot?
Well, that statistic is misleading because he really wasn't the power play quarterback last year for probably 3/4 of the season.
But at the time he was, did he do well?
Yes, he did well. I mean, he scored 20 goals one year. I mean, I'd have to pull up the stats, but he was an effective power play quarterback. I mean, teams, I think
that's my point.
Right, but I think he still can be. He's still good offensively. I mean, obviously the same.
He is good offensively. I'll agree with you.
The same issue that happened with Riley before, which was teams know he doesn't have a big shot from the point, so they peel off and they cover Nylander and Matthews. He's basically, Mitch Marner was essentially the same type of power play quarterback. He doesn't have a shot from the point. He was a distributor, but he's probably a little more.
But Larson has a good shot.
I know, and they've tried him on the power play quarterback for half the season, and it hasn't worked. So they've tried that. They tried the 5-forward power play, but I don't understand why they're putting Easton Cowan out there. It's like there are other forwards. So I mean, they tried everything with Savard. It didn't work. The general consensus is in Toronto is this was a sacrifice, as I termed it. They threw Mark Savard into the volcano like Tom Hanks and Joe versus the volcano, hoping it would satisfy the gods. Well, it didn't. And if they keep losing, then Brad Treliving is going to have another meeting with the media explaining why he fired Craig Berube.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, they could have gone out and just traded like a 2029 7th round pick for Igor Zamula, since Zamula has power play experience.
At this point,
Well,
they might as well have auditions.
all I can say is this. I mean, the Leafs have shaken up their lines and defensive pairings today. Chris Tanev is back, which is a big help, but they've paired on the top pairing. They've paired Morgan Riley with Philippe Myers.
I mean, again, this is that I blame on Berube. Philip Myers hasn't been serviceable in many, many years, and just because he's big doesn't mean that's a good enough reason.
He's big and he's right-handed, and that's the reason why he's paired with Riley.
I'm right-handed, and I'm getting bigger, so, like, what's the difference?
But you're not big.
Well, it depends. But I'm just saying, this whole thing.
Where the hell is this conversation going?
I'm not going there or there. So Jesus Christ.
No, I didn't expect you to go there, Mike.
You went there.
No, I didn't. I actually
opened the door.
Maybe I opened the door. But at any rate, this is just one of those perplexing things, and we'll try and track it and see what happens. But Mike, I mean, they're not going to even be able to wait until the Olympic break. They may be out of it by next month.
They may be out of it now, Russ. I mean, we talked about. I mean, they're 8 points out of the out of third place in the Atlantic. They're 6 points out of the wild card. They need to start winning now, or by the middle of January. Brad for Living will probably start talking trade with teams in terms of recouping some draft capital and try to shake up things a little bit. And
trade any big name on that team.
No, he won't. They can't. I mean, they tried. Remember, last summer they went to Morgan Riley and said, "Do you want to waive your no move clause? Would you be amenable to going?" No. Austin Matthews, no. William Nylander, no. John Tavares, no. They're not, none of them are going anywhere. So
they were still winning at the time, though, and that's where things you start to, if something's going bad in that room, then that could change things.
All right, well, we're going to table that.
Yes.
We're going to welcome in our guest Shane Malloy from Hockey Prospect Radio and the Hockey Data Show. Shane, how are you,
gentlemen? What's going on?
We were talking about bad, but we weren't talking about our football team. So I just want to point that out.
You mean my football team?
Well, mine's bad too.
Listen, this week we got the Anthony and Mike Bowl this week.
That's true.
Yeah, well,
in Buffalo.
I mean, please, the Bills underwhelmed against that juggernaut Browns team.
Listen,
they barely won.
Josh Allen has more commercials than championships. I will say that.
That's because the Browns have the third-rated defense in the league. That's why.
That's true. Miles Garrett would look good in red, white, and blue.
So Shane, with the World Juniors getting ready to start, it has sparked some discussion online with differences in leagues. You know, the Canadian Hockey League and college hockey as an example. We have an old friend, Gordy Clark, who once said to both of us, when they come out with a way of basically lining up all the leagues and grading them out so I could see it on an even line, let me know, because that would be great. So my question to you is, by watching the World Juniors, can you draw any conclusions from the Canadian Hockey League or NCAA hockey as to who's better, what's tougher, or anything even remotely close to that?
Well, not through the World Juniors. That's not applicable in that respect. They're entirely two different leagues. So the CHL is more related to the USHL. It's a junior league that has kids from 16 to 20, and generally you only carry 3 20s. And then college hockey is an entirely different animal, because at earliest you might get a late 17-year-old. Earliest it's an 18, and there's only a few of those. Most of the freshmen are 19. So the average age in the CHL is 18 years of age. The average age in college hockey in the U.S. is 21.5 years of age. So that's a 3.5-year difference. So that's like apples and oranges. You're playing against boys or you're playing against young men consistently. And many of those players are 22, 23, sometimes 24. Mm-hmm. So it's like apples and oranges. Yeah, it's hockey, but it's not even remotely the same.
And it's coming up related to this draft, whether it's Gavin McKenna, whether it's, Verhoff, it's coming up. And
there's a problem related in that, though, is the commentary around that, the challenge is, and when I was first starting out, I had a really great pro scout that helped me out, and he worked for the Maple Leafs, and Mike Penny, and he said the best thing you can do is go see every level during the week. So I could see Junior A at that time, the BC Hockey League, and the WHL, then the American League and the NHL all in the same week. And then I would travel and go see the Q and the O, USHL college hockey. And I did that consistently for over a decade. And the advantage of that is, and Mike, it was great advice, is you don't get caught with tunnel vision, and you start to understand the differences between each league. So that if you're just covering or you just watch one particular league, you don't understand or have the concept, the context, or the nuance of the other leagues. So even if you watch it on TV, it helps you a little, but you still miss the context and nuance of that. So, and I know it's come up recently with our, the draft and with Gavin McKenna and whether he, just should be number one. And they're talking about his particular point production. Remember, he was a 17-year-old freshman coming in. He's playing against 21-and-a-half-year-old young men on average. There's a 4-year difference. And he's still over a point a game. And he's not, and you can't compare him to what Macklin Celebrini did or Adam Fantilli did, because they're different styles of players. They were on different teams. They had different rosters. They played a different system. They played different styles. They played in a different conference. I mean, Fantilli, didn't obviously, but Macklin Celebrini did. Yeah. And they had different strength of rosters that they played on and different strength of competition. Yeah. So again, you can't compare that. That doesn't make any sense. So from my perspective,
Penn State's not a big high scoring team. And actually McKenna is averaging 0.88 assists a game, which was, I don't know, something in like 10 or 12 in the nation.
Yeah. It's not comparable in that he doesn't have the strength of roster comparative to the others as well. So there's that discussion going on about whether he deserves to be number one. And I'll simply say this about the narrative of Gavin McKenna is I think he deserves to stay at number one at this point. And then the narrative surrounding him is biased and ill-conceived and poorly informed and poorly thought out. Honestly, it's just an easy way to get attention. But do I look at the fact that could Keaton Verhoff upsert him and be the number one overall? Certainly. He's a 6'4", over 200-pound right shot defenseman. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day,
how could he do that, Shane, if he's not better than Carroll's, who's in the WHL putting up I'm just being a jerk. I'm being a jerk.
No. That I understand. I understand the jerk part. Yeah. Your argument I don't understand, but yeah, the jerk part I understand. That's right. That's after a couple decades. You just accept it. It's okay. You move on. Verhoff is the one player. Could Stenberg give him a fight? Certainly. It's possible, but I certainly wouldn't put anybody at this point.
Not Tynan Lawrence as a center?
Okay, sure. Look, man, no, he's a really good player. I'm not going to dismiss anybody in the top 10 for their abilities. I'm simply destroying the ill-conceived narrative that's being built around McKenna because somebody else's expectations. This is something that Russ and I had to learn early. And Gordy Clark helped us with that. The fact of the matter is, when it comes to expectations, the biggest issue is the talent evaluator. They're the biggest. Yeah. You're the biggest problem in your life. You got to look in the mirror. So, whose expectations? What was wrong? The likelihood it isn't nothing wrong with the player. It's most likely the evaluator, and what your expectations were of him going into the season.
It's a cynical way of doing business too.
Well, no, look, man, regardless of what the industry is like, that doesn't stop individuals from making a well thought out analysis. Mm-hmm. And if you don't understand, don't guess, and then put out these ridiculous statements about him as a player. He's a 17-year-old kid, just turned 18. He's still over a point a game. It's crazy to think of that. So I sort of put that to rest. I think it's going to end up probably being a 2-horse race. And because Verhoff is a right shot, big defenseman who's mobile and will end up probably being pretty close, if not a number one defenseman. So if you have a choice to be having a top flight winger who can produce points, who's a dual threat, or a number one defenseman, sorry, kid. It's like the argument if you had Patrick Kane and Drew Doughty in the same draft. Okay, who are you taking here? The end of the day, Patrick Kane was a great player, Hall of Famer. I'm taking
Drew Doughty was fat, so they wouldn't have taken him anyhow.
Well, that's not the point. Yeah, he was fat to be in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, great. So, yeah. Right. Hey, just remember this, Drew. When you hear I'm defending you.
Hey, I'm fat.
It's the Canadian that's defending you.
I'm fat. Do I belong in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah. I don't know what Hall of Fame you're going to be in.
Oh, he'll be in the Hall of Fame. He'll be in the Hall of Fame, all right.
The a-hole Hall of Fame. Shane, the Buffalo Sabres made sort of a paradigm shift last week, finally moving on from Kevin Adams after 5.5 seasons and hired Jarmo Kekalainen, which was the worst secret known to man because he came in as a special advisor. And if Adams didn't get this team, or if the team didn't get into wasn't in a playoff spot, he was going to get axed. But I told you something earlier about the Sabres draft record. And if you look at Adams, he made some decent trades, he made some bad trades, but I think the thing that's the most glaring about him is that in 5 drafts, he did okay with the first round picks, but he drafted players who are NHLers. But from the 2nd round to the 7th round, I know that the percentage of these players playing in the NHL goes down, but in 5 drafts, he's got one guy who played NHL games, Tyson Kozak. No one else from the 2nd to the 7th round has played a game. If you look at things, that's a reason why he probably should have been let go a few years ago and finally was let go last week.
Well, for me, it's more, I look at it more from the strategic standpoint. Look at the types of players he drafted. So you come in and you already have a Jack Quinn. Okay. And if you look at a top 6, you could have 2 of those types of players. But what do? Then you go and draft a player like Isaac Rosén, and then Noah Ostlund, and then Matt Savoy, and then Zach Benson. And so you automatically went and drafted 3 extra players. They're not exactly, now Zach Benson obviously is a little bit more grittier than obviously the others, but you drafted 3 of them that were unnecessary. So you drafted a similar playing style, and this is one of the issues I have when you're evaluating drafts. And one of the things I look at the organization specifically, not just efficiency in terms of quantity or the quality, which is a different study. But one of the interesting things you look at Vegas, people will say Vegas didn't build through the draft. I'm like, yes, they did. Because they did one thing really intelligently, and other teams do this as well, is they don't just draft for their organization, they draft for the rest of the league too. Because how often does that player stay in your organization? So he has to have value in your organization, but everybody else's organization too. And that was one of the biggest mistakes, I think, in drafting with the Buffalo Sabres, is not recognizing that and then taking into consideration, take a look at the playoffs and what style of players are most successful. So unless you're absolutely elite skilled, you have to have these other B game attributes, which these players don't have that they've drafted. So now you're in a situation where Isaac Rosén's value won't be as high as his draft slot provided, either with Noah Ostlund, either with, Benson, and obviously Savoy was moved. So that's part of the issue as well, is now Jarmo has to, he's trading, if he trades these players off, it's from a lesser position. Their value has gone down based on their draft position. So it'll be interesting to see what Jarmo will do. What he did in Columbus in terms of drafting was very good. Occasionally, I thought he took some unnecessary risk later in the first round. He'll swing for the fences. I'm a little bit more conservative. I understand his position. We've had discussions, and I've had obviously discussions with his staff when he was in Columbus about their strategies. It's just a difference of opinion. I would have taken less risk. However, it's going to be monumentally better than what they have done in the past, which is certainly going to be, there's going to be some consistency in terms of how they identify players and what style of players they identify and what the value of those players are, particularly as you're building out a roster, but also for the playoffs and other organizations. So I think that matters. And he's going to, I think the biggest factor, and I know everybody likes to look at the rosters and everybody likes to look at their prospects. I'm actually more interested in what Yarmo, when he was first hired, my first thought was, okay, how is he going to rebuild his hockey operations staff? That was actually most critical to me and my thoughts, because I look at it from this perspective, a little bit more business perspective is you can say at the end of the year, oh, our players, or I didn't think our players met expectations. Okay, but the hockey ops department is responsible for those players. You traded for them, you drafted them, you developed them, you signed them as free agents. It's the hockey ops department's responsibility. The fault should go to them, not to the players, because you chose them. You chose the coaches. You chose your scouts. You chose your player development department. Like, you hired all those people. So I think the biggest change for Yarmo, and we've already seen it start to come, is how he rebuilds his hockey ops staff and who he hires. Because in most companies that fail, particularly when they get larger, is they fail in the middle. It's not the CEO that's the problem or the average worker in lower management. It's middle management. It always breaks in the middle. So it's your assistant general managers and your directors of your departments. It's absolutely critical that he hires the right people and people that are competent and that people have a track record. So, you should hire for talent and basically get out of the way and build an environment to allow them to be at their natural best. So when I look at Yarmo, he started to do that already. Obviously, he's brought in a couple people. I fully suspect that he will purge the pro and amateur department and the player development department by July 1st when all the contracts end. I think it's going to be a full end purge. And I think he was fortunate because he had 7-8 months to really evaluate what was really going on. And I think that made all the difference in the world of him understanding, okay, who are these people? What are these people like? How do they make decisions? What's their track record? What's their processes? Okay, I understand what they are. I have to make changes. And I think that's the best thing for the Buffalo Sabres fans is you're going to have a steady hand on the rudder. He doesn't always have to hit home runs. I think most importantly is just don't step on landmines, right? Don't make the critical errors. If you don't make the critical errors, there's enough talent in this organization to be a wild card team and then build upon that.
And the other thing I'll add on that, Shane, is just the fact that, I look at his experience. I think his ability probably to be able to pull off advantageous trades. Whereas I sometimes wondered about Kevin Adams and his, he came into the job and experienced. You're getting a very steady person in this case who has already built and established relationships with a lot of general managers.
That helps too. You can be an inexperienced general manager in hockey and still be an effective manager, actually even highly effective manager, if you have background in business, in different types of management and negotiation and understanding finance, understanding economics, so that you can actually take models that you use in your business and apply it back to players. So all of that is all applicable. And do you have some academic experience in there as well to be able to lean on that as well? Yeah. So you could come in with, practical experience, some academic experience, and not necessarily have the high end, a decade worth of hockey ops experience and still do well. I think that's where Adams, the biggest challenge is. And again, I think if we look at the history of hockey ops departments, I think one of the biggest issues is hiring. Is hiring the right people and not relying upon old relationships or friends and letting the nepotism take hold in that respect and really do your due diligence. Now, organizations say they do due diligence, but that's not always the fact.
It's lip service sometimes.
And most of the time I would say it's lip service based on the results of what's happened. So I'm curious to see what Yarmo does from now until obviously when July 1st hits in terms of how he changes his hockey ops staff. Now, he has some limitations in that because people are still under contract till July. Right. So you can't completely purge and find people to replace that at Christmas time. That's a very difficult proposition. So I have heard this not from Yarmo, but I've heard this from other GMs or other management where they've been in that position, and they don't isolate those people. They listen to them, but they really don't take a lot of the information they provide with them.
Well, we can go back to Kyle
a little bit of a
Dubas.
grain of salt.
We could go back to Kyle Dubas in Toronto, who literally just did his own draft and ignored everything else.
2018, he basically opened up the OHL book and he said, "Oh, I'll pick this guy."
Well, one of the interesting things when it comes to Toronto is from 2006 to 2015, the Toronto Maple Leafs were the fourth most efficient team in drafting and developing in the entire league to get players to play 200 games. In one draft, they had got 6 out of 7 players to play the more. It's like astonishing how good they really were, but nobody had done any research on them. Nobody. So if you actually had done some research, even at that time, you would have realized you had really good people in place. So they had Dave Morrison and John Lilly and Garth Malarchuk, and they had a really good group of amateur scouts. So scouting and development wasn't Toronto's problem. They had an asset management problem. And then Kyle Dubas came in with his new group, and then they had a drafting problem where they didn't produce anybody.
And now
we've seen that. There's a 5-year period where they might get 3 players in 5 years.
And now they have a drafting problem, Shane, because they don't have any draft picks. But okay, that's
another situation where you play the hand you're dealt, and that's one of the things that Mike, you and I talked about is these are the challenges when you don't. And this is like we'll use Vancouver Canucks as an example. When you don't draft well for 15 years in a row, the problem is you don't have any push from below. So if you do have to make trades, you have to either you have 3 buckets. You got draft picks, which are futures. You got your prospects, which you've already drafted and are currently developing, if you have any, and then your NHL roster. So you have 3 buckets to play with. And when you're trying to make acquisitions or you're trying to get free agents, if you're drawing from only 2 buckets, other teams know, and then we're just gonna we're gonna leverage that against you, and then you're forced to pay too much in future to make up for that. So instead of taking a little bit from each bucket, you're having to take more from primarily the future, which is where Toronto is now. So they got 2 prospects. You got Easton Cowan and you got Ben Danford. Now, if you trade both of those away, you have nothing coming for a 5-year period, maybe more. Right. And so what they'd have to pull off is they have to pull off a Colorado Avalanche, who are equally inept at drafting and developing as the Vancouver Canucks. They're almost as bad. However, they're exceptionally brilliant when it comes to trades value and free agents, so they make up for it. But how long can you do that? The Canucks did that with Gillis and Gilman. That regime, that era, they did the same thing. They made up for their bad drafting. So we're going to see what happens in Toronto. They're going to have to make up for it. And they don't have much to play with.
Shane, question from just to shift it a little bit to World Juniors. I'm finding this particular Czech roster a fascinating one. I'm feeling like this could be a low-key, pretty good team and very competitive. What are your thoughts about the Czech roster that's currently constructed?
Some big bodies. Mm-hmm. And this is what they're going to – you know what? Actually, it's funny when I think about the Czechs, they're starting to slowly turn into another version of the Finns. Where in that respect, and I call Finns basically they're the Rocky Balboa of the World Juniors. Is they're not a great fighter because they don't generally have every once in a while they have some really top end players, but they generally don't have that level of depth. But they fight great, like they work their rear ends off. They play a high structured game. They play within their system, and they keep coming at you. And they keep coming at you and they wear you down. The Czechs are starting to become that. They also are they recognize is that if we're not as skilled, we need to be bigger. Right. So we're going to play harder on you. We're going to wear you out so that when we get into the semifinals, or we get into the corners and we get into the semis, we're going to hope that we have worn you down enough. So we get into the third period, like the Finns, we want to be tied with you going midway through the third. Because then you're going to be panicking if you're an American, either the Americans or the Canadians or the Swedes. And that's what ends up happening. It's why they end up knocking teams off that way. Yeah. So, and the Finns got some big defensemen. They got some big boys back there. So they're going to make it real challenging to get in front of the net. Yeah. Max Sneak and Radim Murka, and they got some big boys back there that have some skill too. So I'm interested to see what they do.
Shane, last question. Who is your dark horse guy that we all should watch that maybe isn't getting talked about?
Dark horse guy.
Rolodex.
Hold on. Dark horse guy. Oh, I mean, the draftniks are going to know who this guy is, but I think probably the general public may not. So, Albert Schmitz. He's a big, massive. He's a big, stalwart defenseman.
Lithuanian, Latvian. Yeah.
6'3", 205 pounds, left-hand shot. I do not be shocked that Schmitz goes in the top 12. Might go top 10 because that's really rare. He's a player who could end up being a really good number 3 defenseman in the NHL. A guy who plays heavy in the playoffs and is a smart puck mover. So that would be mine.
Latvia was fun to watch last year when
they got great fans and they play hard. Man, they play really hard. They're just always under the gun, and that's part of the problem. Is their goaltender has to stand on their head, and they got to keep the game tight. Now they're another team who's feisty and they work hard. So don't discount the Latvians to end up potentially knocking somebody out.
Shane, do you think that the goaltending for Team USA is a fatal flaw because they're bringing back a lot of players? I know like Zimmer and Kleber are 2 Sabres prospects. Luke Osborne's probably making their team as well, and they have a lot of talent. But I've heard that the goaltending is potentially something that can keep them from winning their 3rd straight.
I think it is the one area that is the most concerning. Like it's the only weak part of the weakest part of their roster. Defense, balanced and strong. They got lots of really talented players. Their forward group is ridiculous, even with Trevor Connolly being injured.
If they could cut Bruskevich, that tells you how deep their defense is.
Well,
I know. That's what I'm saying.
And that's honestly, I think that's crazy, but you do whatever you want. I think the difference between the American goaltender this year is they're average to good, but not elite. So they don't have elite goaltending like they've had in the past. They had the embarrassment of riches. This year, it's all the Canadians. The 2 Canadian goaltenders, that's the best duo in the tournament and arguably the best goaltender in the tournament. So I know Michael Harabo may, push that, but we'll see. But I honestly think just terms of talent, just on roster, it's the Canadians to lose. Like they have the best talented roster going into this tournament. We'll see what happens.
Sweden will be tough. I think Sweden will be a tough out. I do.
It depends on their defense because they're not big, but they're really highly mobile. So if you're going to put the forecheck on them, you better make sure that you get on those D fast because they're exceptionally quick. Yeah. So they're highly mobile. They can transport the puck. One of the things I really like about the Swedes is look at their forward roster. They have so many guys who can play two-way. They have so many good two-way forwards, so they're going to be able to help insulate that defense core as well. I'm not saying the defense core is bad because that's not it. They're just not as big and bulky as some previous groupings that they've had. So they're very mobile in that respect. When you look at Alphonse Fraze or Sasha Boumediene, players like that, they can transport, they can skate. So it's a skating defense. So you have to be wary of that.
All right. Shane, thanks so much for coming on. Everybody should catch him on SiriusXM, hockeyprospectradio.com, and just anywhere. You catch him on the street, talk to him. He'll talk to you. No, he won't? Okay.
No, he won't.
No, he won't.
That's it for Off the Post. We'll catch everybody next time.
Take care, everybody.